Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, here we go. After a week-long wait, it is almost over. We are a day away. The Final Four in the WNBA is set. You got the defending champions, the Chicago Sky, in another playoff rematch against the Connecticut Sun as the Suns search for their first championship in franchise history. And then on the other side of the bracket, you got the Seattle Storm taking on the Las Vegas Aces in a rematch of the 2020 WNBA Finals. And this right here, this is your 2022 WNBA Playoff Las Vegas Aces preview. My name is Adrian Hernandez. Whether you're tuned in on 1140 The Bet, 985 The Fan, HD2, on the Audacy app, or wherever you get your podcasts, we're just trying to make sure we can get you closer to these games as tip-off 1 p.m. Aces versus the Storm. And yes, we are a Las Vegas station over here, so we're going to be focusing primarily on the Seattle Storm versus the Las Vegas Aces. And I don't even have this on the script, but rightfully so that we spend most of our attention on this series. And no disrespect to the Sky or the Sun. Let's talk about it really quick as we kick off the show. 7 number 1 picks in this series. That is a WNBA and NBA record. I just said it, a 2020 WNBA Finals rematch. The number 1 and number 2 candidates for MVP in Breanna Stewart versus A'ja Wilson. Jewell Loyd versus Chelsea Gray. Oh, by the way, one of the greatest of all time, Sue Bird, her final playoff run. What is the Storm going to come out? How are they going to react? How are they going to play to try to make sure Sue Bird retires on top with a championship? Oh, yeah, Coach of the Year in Becky Hammon in the WNBA. All-Star Game MVP this season in Kelsey Plum. Talent all over the place. So many storylines. A rivalry renewed, and we can't wait to get into it. So what we're going to do is try to get you the best insight and the most knowledge as we head into this series. So I'm bringing along a couple of friends to join us. So from ESPN, Alex Philippou will be joining us here in a minute to break down and to get into everything. Rachel Galligan, friend of the show from Just Women Sports, from Winsider, she'll be joining us to give us that former coach and former player perspective. And then from WNBA.com, The Athletics, Dime Up Rocks. He's all over the place, one of the best in the business. Matt Schindler is going to be joining us. So for you, tap in with us throughout the show and let us know what you're thinking, what matchups, who do you think is going to win out, who's making it to the finals between these Final Four teams, and who's going to end up winning the entire thing, even the MVP race. Who do you got? Is it Breanna? Is it Stewie? Is it A'ja Wilson? Tap in with us on Twitter at Adrian Radio 93, at The Bet Las Vegas, at Audacy Sports. And that's setting the stage. Let's get straight into the knowledge and the insight. Alex Philippou from ESPN joins us next. It is your 2022 WNBA Playoff Las Vegas Aces preview. We're a day away from the madness. Welcome back to the WNBA Playoff Preview Show here on Audacy Sports, as this week-long wait is almost over for the Las Vegas Aces to take on the Seattle Storm in a highly anticipated matchup. And let's get some insight on this series and the WNBA as a whole from one of the best in the business, and I say that truthfully and sincerely, from ESPN. I'm just saying, it's the truth, Alexa. From ESPN covering women's basketball. Alexa, here we go with the last name pronunciation. Philippou, I got it right?
Yes.
Let's go. This interview, first 15 seconds is fire, and I'm not even done with the intro. Alexa Philippou is joining us. Alexa, thank you so much for the time. How are you doing? How excited are you for this Final Four in this WNBA playoffs?
Oh, yeah. I can't wait. It's been weird not to have games the last few days and to just kind of be waiting for the semis to start, but I think the wait was going to be worth it because we have some really exciting matchups coming up.
100%. And before we get into this Final Four, I'm just curious when it comes to the first round, and this year was the transition year from the single elimination to the 3-game series. I'm curious. I know James Wade of the Chicago Sky said before their first round matchup, he didn't really like the format of it. in terms of the home games and away games and the situation that puts some of the higher seeds in. What's your take on that, though?
Well, we have a small sample size of only 1 year, but I think the better team prevailed through each of the first round games, even though some of the series did go to a decisive game three. So in some ways, it's like, okay, what was expected to happen happened. I think that having some of those matchups or some of those teams being single elimination games could have been more risky than having them to go on the road and, have to pull out of game three. So I'm really interested to see what it looks like long term and what trends we see emerge. Maybe it's not the ideal format, which would be maybe 1-1-1 where you're going back and forth, but because of the travel situation right now in the WNBA, I'm not totally opposed to this. Even though I did like the single elimination games for like the really early rounds, maybe not for like some of the better teams to be in, but I think that what kind of was expected or maybe should have happened based off like who were the clear better teams ended up happening this round or this year, and I think that's okay for now. So I think it's in a good spot.
And as we transition into the Aces and Storm series, let's get a little spicy real quick. Alexa, truthfully, who do you believe is the MVP this year?
I voted for Adrian Wilson.
Okay,
so
Vegas loves you.
I'm not just saying that because I'm talking to some Vegas folks, but it was really hard. I thought that Brianna Stewart also had a really strong case, and I was going back and forth for a while. But I think at the end of the day, we tend to recognize MVPs as like the best player or the player who propels the best team to success, and that ended up being the Aces. And she's gotten it done on both ends of the floor. And yes, she has help around her, but I didn't really think that was enough to kind of detract from, I think what was really like a just incredible season from Wilson. So I did vote for Asia.
All right, let's go. Vegas approves. I can hear it now. And with that, let's go straight into this series. Of course, a few weeks ago, the regular season finale, Sue Bird's final game. It was on ABC. It broke an attendance record for the Aces with over 10,000 people at the game. It was the most viewed regular season WNBA game since 2008. And there was playoff seeding implications for both teams. Today, you've seen it everywhere throughout social media. A combined 7 number 1 picks in the draft in this series, which is not only a WNBA record, it is an NBA record as well. So simply put, Alexa, it simply does not get better than this, right?
Oh, no. I think this could easily have been a final series. It's wild that this is going to be a semifinal matchup, but I mean, you can't ask for anything more than this. You have the history of these teams facing off back in 2020 for the title, but both teams are different. Some of the major players are the same, but I mean, the Aces in particular, I think, are really different. They're totally night and day from 2020, and I'm intrigued to see. I mean, it's going to be. There's just so many storylines between that. You have, Becky Hammond just won Coach of the Year today. Can she kind of get the Aces to the title game? And if she does succeed in leading them to a championship, she'd be the first head coach since Van Chancellor in the inaugural season of the WNBA to win a title in their first year. So there's that kind of thing to look for. But then also the Storm have Sue Bird about to retire, and everyone, of course, I'm sure, in Seattle wants Sue Bird to go out with one last title. And Tina Charles is also fighting for her first. So there's so many storylines, and there's going to be some really great basketball, I think, to come in that series.
And with all that being said, from the outlook and kind of having a week to digest and go into all these matchups, what are the key factors that you're looking at for either team as we head into this series on Sunday?
Yeah, I'm really curious to see how the Aces do defensively, because whenever you hop on a media call or some sort of availability with Becky Hammond, she's always talking about how she wants more or expects more from her team's defense. And I think that's always interesting because the Aces get so much attention on the offensive end. Everyone's talking about how they shoot threes and they're playing this like awesome style of basketball, but she's really mostly concerned with how they're doing in the defensive end. So I'm curious about that. And I think there's some interesting X factors here too. In terms of the Storm, I would be really interested to see how Jewell Loyd does, because she's had some really high highs and really low lows, I felt like, this season, and whether or not we see the kind of Jewel Lloyd that we all know to be true, the former number one pick, and just someone who can wreak havoc offensively and defensively. I think that gives us the Storm a really good shot. But if she's not impactful, then I think that really lends itself in the Aces' favor. So there's a lot of interesting moving parts there, but definitely going to be a good series for sure.
And even with Joe Lloyd, like going up against the Aces, the second to last game that they played, the third game out of the 4 they played this season, I believe Joe Lloyd, she played 30 minutes. She only had 1 point. And then in the finale, she went off for 38. So you get both sides of the spectrum. And earlier today, the general manager of the Aces was here locally in Las Vegas, appeared on a radio station, and said Dearica Hamby is going to be out for this series, dealing with the bone bruise. They said 2 to 4 weeks. Technically today, just for everyone listening, because I know this is airing on Saturday, it is Friday, which means it has been 15 days since that injury. They said 2 to 4 weeks. I know Becky Hammond is going to speak to the media here in an hour to get more transparency and I guess to confirm. But that kind of plays into the thing that's kind of been looming and on my head throughout this entire season, despite all the success that the Aces have had, is this team doesn't have a lot of depth, and more fatigue becomes a bigger factor. And even looking at Asia Wilson, if we go back to when Becky, before the end of the regular season, when she switched out and put Kia Stokes into the starting lineup for Dearica Hamby, it was interesting, and a lot of people were like, well, maybe she can handle Tina Charles a little bit better. And without Dearica being in there, that just adds to this fatigue factor. So for you, is that a big concern heading into this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, even though Dearica didn't have a super strong last little stint there before her injury, I do think the depth of the Aces remains a big question. I'm not one of those people that feels like you need to have the deepest team to win. Sometimes I feel like if you do whatever you're really good at so well, and if you continue to do that during the postseason, that might be enough. So I don't think that's a huge reason for Aces fans to be, to start to totally panic. But I do think losing a player like Hamby does obviously present some issues in terms of like what she brings to the floor. She's so good at creating her own offense, getting on the glass, defensively. She's versatile. So there are some concerns there. I think Kia Stokes has done a pretty good job, and obviously the Aces have continued to have success even with Hamby out, but it's not exactly the sort of absence that you're hoping for in a big series like this. So it does remain a question, but at the same time, the Storm aren't necessarily the deepest team in the league either. Maybe I think they probably play more players longer for longer stretches than the Aces do, but they're not maybe not in the most kind of impactful ways. So I'm not sure if that necessarily will help the Aces, but it is just another factor on the other side too. So it'll be really interesting to see. And then if they do advance, are they going to, is Hamby going to be back for the finals? That would be a whole other question, and what form, of course, she'd be in by then. But that's a problem to worry about later.
Yeah, for sure. Hopefully a problem that they're going to have to deal with. And as you're talking, I'm just curious, like with Washington going up against Seattle, obviously Washington isn't as a, how do I say this, a transitional fast-paced team like the Aces. No one is. The Aces are the number one team in transition in the league. And Washington was more methodical. In terms of Seattle having to deal with the Aces, do you think it's going to be a big adjustment going from polar opposites with Washington and the Aces now?
Well, it might be an adjustment kind of on paper, but the Storm are such an experienced team, and they can play that way. We've seen them kind of do that before. That I think they're going to be prepared to do it, and they have all this time now. Obviously, the Aces did too, because both those series ended in 2 games. But they'll be ready to roll, and I'm really interested. I think more so than pace, the kind of perimeter threats that Vegas has and how that will challenge Seattle. And if Seattle, I don't think at this time know the status of Gabby Williams, who's one of their best defenders. That's another thing to look out for too. Is will she play, and how are you going to slow down? I've been calling it the Vegas backcourt big 3, because now that Chelsea Gray is just going off the way she has, I think you can have your own big 3 just from the backcourt. And then, of course, you still have Asia Wilson doing her thing down low. But, that's going to be a really interesting matchup for Seattle. And that's where I think that's going to be a huge matchup too. How they try and slow down that backcourt in particular with their perimeter defense.
And I love how you say the backcourt big three because I'm biased, obviously, covering the team and being here in Las Vegas, and I'm trying to poke holes into this team, the Aces, that is. And I'm kind of wondering, one thing that I've enjoyed within this past 7-game win streak ever since the Commissioner's Cup victory in Chicago has kind of been how, whether it's Chelsea Gray, whether it's Asia, whether it's Jackie Young, whether it's Kelsey Plum, they've kind of picked each other up. Where, for instance, if Kelsey Plum has a bad first quarter, it doesn't matter because Jackie Young's going to go off for 10 plus points in the quarter. And then the person struggling, whoever that may be, still keeps that confidence because the offense is still being successful. Is that something that is going to be sustainable? Granted, it has been all year. Do I have any reason to believe that might stop?
Yeah, I'm kind of in the camp of, it's worked this well for them so far. Again, it's going to be challenging to go up against the Storm's defense and up against, if they were to face Chicago or Connecticut in the finals. Those are also two tough defensive teams in different ways. But I just think there's something to be said about how the Aces, maybe they don't have as much depth in terms of who they go to on their bench, but you do have various players who can step up at different times, and I've really proven that already. And there's some sort of just clutch factor and a trust in each other that I know Becky Hammond's really tried to instill in her culture this year, that I think that could go a long way. Will it be enough? Who's to say? We'll have to see about that, but I think it certainly bodes well for their ability to respond to adversity in the postseason.
Alexa Philippou joining us from ESPN covering all women's basketball. Be sure to follow her at Alexa Philippou. And before we get you out of here, it's the moment of truth, Alexa. I need a prediction for both semifinals as we hit the Final Four stage of these WNBA playoffs.
Well, I'm officially on the record as having the Sky winning the one series and the Aces beating the Storm in the other semifinal. And I actually have, and this is online, so I'm going to stick with my guns here with my gut, but I do have the Aces. That was my prediction to win it all. So I'm even though the Storm looks really good in the first round, the Sky have been looking really good. The Sun, you can't count out. I'm going to stick to my guns, and that's my prediction. So maybe I'll eat crow, but
you are
that for now.
You are buttering up this Las Vegas audience, and I'm not mad at it at all, Alexa.
I swear I'm not pandering. This was all done before this interview.
Yeah, and it's online, like you said, and this will never go away. It will be available on the Audacy app. But Alexa, sincerely, I appreciate all the coverage that you give for the league throughout the entire year. Super informative. I hope the Aces make it to the finals, because then that means you have to join us for our WNBA finals preview show. But thank you so much for sparing some time during this busy time of the season.
Thank you. This was fun. Thanks for having me.
Of course. There it is. Alexa Philippou, one of the best in the business. And I say that truthfully and sincerely again from ESPN covering women's basketball. Alexa Philippou. More hesitation on pronouncing guests' last names and more illustrious guests on the way. It is your Audacy Sports WNBA playoff preview show. We are back counting down the hours, the minutes, the seconds until the Aces host the Seattle Storm again Sunday, 1 p.m. Michelob Ultra Arena for the WNBA semifinals. And after a week-long break, in the words of Jesus and Mero, who we all miss tremendously, please welcome someone who is illustrious and creates the dopest of content, stories, and insight for WNBA.com. Dime Uprocks, The Athletic, checking in from my hometown of Cleveland, Ohio. Mark Slindler joins us. Mark, are you prepared for Sunday, my friend?
I'm definitely ready for Sunday, and Jesus, I need it even sooner after reminding me that Jesus and Mero's over. I wasn't ready for that reminder today, but we're here now. So.
Yo,
how's everything on your end, man?
Yeah, we're good. I'm a little heartbroken having to put that in there, but that's why I paid homage with the illustrious. But we're good. We're excited. We got some breaking news. So this is airing for everyone who's tuned in live on the radio or listening to us on the Audacy app or wherever you get your podcasts. We are recording this Friday afternoon. Aces are in the middle of practice, and Coach of the Year is going to speak to the media here in about a half an hour. But that news just broke. So I guess we'll start off right there on what you've seen on the dynamic of her coming in, getting hired, getting the money, Mark Davis, all the support, and kind of switching everything that the Aces have done before in being a fast-paced three-point shooting, run and gun style team and the most efficient offense in the league.
Yeah, I mean, you hit it all on the head, man. I think when I knew Becky was coming in, obviously, when Bill stepped down originally, I think that was. I mean, I wasn't entirely sure what to think of what Becky's system was going to be because, I mean, a coach can come in and say all the things they want in their opening presser, but until you see it play out on court, harder to see. But, I mean, off rip, I mean, they've been fantastic. They had, stretches where they were playing like the best offense in basketball. And they were, if I remember correctly, I think statistically they ended up the best offense in the WNBA since the 2019 Mystics, which are, I believe, the best offensive team basketball's ever seen. So, like, yeah, I mean, it's been really impressive to watch. I think, I mean, it's easy to point out just the taking more threes. Like, that's a big part of it, but a lot of it's just the principles outside of that. How much they rely on drive and kick, the ability that they really take to spread everyone out. I mean, Katie Barnes from ESPN, they had a really good article today, feature on Kelsey Plum, and Kelsey Plum talked about, her sitting down with Becky before the season and then talking about what that was going to look like and changing up things. And ultimately, I did a feature on Jackie Young not too long ago and talking about her and the way that she's grown her game. I mean, being a Vegas person, like seeing the way that she's blossomed this year into a most improved player is largely because of her jump shooting. And, that's been a years-long process to get there. So I think this year you're just kind of seeing all of that come to fruition from every team. So, like, I mean, just to be transparent too, I'm an awards voter, and I voted Becky Coach of the Year for all this. Like, I think there were multiple, like, I mean, James Wade and Tanisha Wright were both well-deserved in my opinion too, but I felt with how good the Aces have been all year, and especially considering, like, this is a team that's been good for a while, but to take that next step and to see how much Becky has been a part of that, talking to any of the players on the team, I felt like that was a pretty easy choice to me. So I think she definitely deserved it.
No, 100%. And you just won the hearts of Vegas 2 minutes into the interview. So well done, Mark. And as we kick this off, let's get straight into this Seattle Storm and Aces series that's going to kick off on Sunday. So I guess the simple question that I'm going to ask everyone on the show is, we've had a week to kind of dive in and look at the matchups, this, that, and the third. What are your initial thoughts on how this series is going to play out?
I mean, that's a great question. I actually am planning on going back and rewatching some of the games before Sunday, but I think I look at this very much so as the Aces kind of have the Storm's number, in my opinion. I mean, I think a lot of it's going to depend on, like, I mean, they definitely are going to have some, like, shooting variance is going to play a part in this. Like, they can't really afford to have a bad shooting game. Like, no team can, obviously, but I think, I mean, even when they played the Storm in that final-ish game of the season, I think both teams scored close to 100 points. Like, that was just, the offense was absolutely insane. Chelsea Gray was amazing. That's even with Jewel Lloyd being on kind of a heater again. Playing
he scored
back
38 that game.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think that was career high for her. Like, we're starting to see her be her again, which huge for the Storm. But I think, again, just to point out, like, this Aces team was able to beat them even with Jewel finally clicking on all cylinders like she's capable of. I think there's just so much offense on this team. And again, I think a lot of people point out the bench, but I just think even in that star-studded group in the starting lineup, they have so much in terms of players who can create from all areas of the floor that it's just so hard to match up with. Even with as good as Seattle's defense has been throughout the year, like, they rely a lot on being able to put two players on the ball. But Chelsea Gray, Kelsey Plum, they're adept at picking stuff apart if they get to the ball. If you have any kind of mismatch with Asia Wilson on the weak side or down low or even just isolated on the baseline or something, like, that's easy money. That's another way to cause a defensive rotation or just easy points. Jackie Young is great attacking anywhere once she catches the ball and she makes good reads and decisions. Like, again, I think a lot's going to depend on Dearica Hamby coming back because I think they'll need her to match up with Brianna Stewart, but because she was pretty pivotal in guarding her in games earlier this season as well. But overall, I just think I look at this Aces team and what they're doing offensively right now and, clicking just enough defensively that I would probably be. I mean, I haven't made my official picks yet, but I'd be pretty comfortable taking the Aces in the
Mark, you
series.
you got about 10 minutes to make your official pick, okay? But first, we got to keep talking. And
Fair enough.
just to be transparent with you, and I'm waiting because in about a half an hour, Becky Hammond's going to talk to the media, of course, about Coach of the Year, but just everything going into this series. What we heard from this morning here locally in Vegas is the GM Natalie Williams appeared on the radio station and said that De'Erica is out for this series still because when the injury happened with the what was it, the bone, not the what the bone,
It's like it's like a deep bone bruise if I remember
yeah, the
correctly.
bone bruise, excuse me, sorry. So when that happened 15 days ago. They said 2 to 4 weeks. Obviously, we're on the 15th day. If she's going to be out, that's going to play a huge role because I'll lay this out for you on both sides. I'll give you a concern for each and tell me how you feel about them. For the Aces, like you just brought up, I'm concerned about the size of Brianna and Tina Charles, especially from not only a fatigue factor and the lack of depth for the Aces, but also just the ability of if they're going to have Asia on Tina, the quick fouls and things that can occur when you're guarding a big. So on that front for the Aces, that's a concern. And then for the Seattle Storm, playing Washington is kind of to me the polar opposite of playing the Aces. Washington's very methodical, very slow paced. They don't like to push it in transition. So for you, out of those two concerns I laid out for each team, which one is more concerning to you overall?
I mean, I think not having Derek is huge. I know a lot of people can look at it and be like, well, she's like the one player who hasn't really been working. And yes, true. But I think what's difficult about this season, especially being that fifth player on the totem pool, like Derek has been for much of the year, I think you lose a lot of things that she does well. Like we just mentioned, like defensively, that just adds another player who has mobility, who has size, who has length, that knows where to be, that has guarded Brianna Stewart a lot throughout the season, allows you to get kind of funkier in some of your defensive matchups too. Not having that hurts. Like, I think you're kind of just automatically putting the box like, all right, we kind of have to put Asia on her. Because I don't really think you want Kia Stokes on her if we're being, like, honestly, like, I think Kia's filled in pretty well. But even then, like, she got hobbled at the end of the Phoenix series, and I think she'll be okay to start the series now with how much time she's had off. But point being, like, they're very thin on the front court depth. Like, obviously, yes, Ilyana Repair is going to be there, but she's pretty much more of a true five, especially how she can play defensively. So
she got banged up too.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, this team definitely needed the time off. And like you mentioned too, the pace. Like, I think, again, not even that Seattle's like crazy quick, but I think they're a lot better at getting into more of an offensive flow than the Aces are. Like, that's my biggest issue with the Aces right now. Like, they have moments of looking like just insanely dominant, especially when they're able to get stops and force turnovers and get out in transition. They look fantastic. But when they just dribble the ball up in the half court and they can kind of get stagnant, and it feels like they forget to use everybody in their offense because they have so many quality players. And I think that kind of got mitigated in the last round because, I mean, you're playing Phoenix, so not to be unfair to them, but they're missing, three of their four best players. So that definitely has a big impact. But Chelsea Gray, being who she's been pretty much since the All-Star game, makes things different. But again, I think you're asking a lot to just fully rely on Chelsea Gray shooting. She shot 74% from the field in those two games against Phoenix. I think you're asking a lot to rely on that. So I think, they have moments of like they try too hard to establish Asia in the post instead of, getting her going on the roll or just finding some more easier ways to get her looks. Like, that's something I really want to see, especially too, like you just mentioned, like this Storm team has a ton of length and defensive versatility that, I mean, they can throw a ton of different looks at anybody on the team. So it will be really interesting to see how those things match up. And I think especially like hearing that Handy's going to miss the entire time, like that gives them a smaller margin for error for sure.
And the Storm are dealing with some injuries too. And if you haven't checked it out throughout the season, this man has been writing a lot of fantastic pieces. He brought up the Jackie Young one, of course, and you did the one on Gabby Williams, who to me, her and Rebecca Gardner in the first round of the playoffs, the way that they were clamping down on people was insane. Now, I don't know what the update is in terms of her coming back from the concussion. Obviously, she's got a week, and she's been balling her ass off. But if she is going to play, in your opinion, what's the best way and what's the most effective way to maximize Gabby? Is it going to be being the primary on-ball defender, or is it guarding Kelsey Plum in the perimeter? Like, how would you use her to maximize her?
I think, honestly with her, I think it's doing kind of everything. Like, I'd imagine that she, that's a good question. I mean, she probably gets the Kelsey assignment. And, I mean, last time we saw them play, she even got some minutes on Asia. Like, if you want to put Stewie help side so she can come over and like, I think that's something that we could see them do. Like, especially with Kia Stokes playing, like, you can just put Brianna Stewart on Kia Stokes and have her help off to muck up the lane. Like, there are a lot of things that they can do interestingly like that. But, I mean, I think what makes Gabby so interesting, part of why I wrote about her, is she does everything. Like you mentioned, like she's one of the best on-ball defenders in the league. She's incredible as a help defender as well. She's pretty impactful from pretty much anywhere on the court. And then, like, I think what was so big in that Mystics series, anytime, like, especially in that first game when you saw them starting to bog down in the half court and Seattle really, struggling a little bit because of how good the Mystics' defense was, like, they used her a ton to initiate sets and get things going. They used her as a screener. They do a ton of really funky stuff that just works because she knows, she just has a really good sense of spacing and how to make herself available and, kind of cheat against how defenses will play her because she's not really a shooter. So I think losing her hurts. Like, even if you can, quote unquote, like, help off of her and be comfortable doing it, like, okay, she's really good at finding gaps to exploit still. So I think if she's healthy, and I think it's not out yet, but a friend of mine who covers the team just tweeted that they're supposed to find out today. She didn't practice today, but they're supposed to get some kind of update on her from Noelle Quinn after practice. But yeah, I mean, having her is really huge, especially too because, like, this team is pretty guard heavy and pretty big heavy when you're looking at the aces. Like, they don't really have a lot of wings. Like, Jackie's really the only wing on the team. So having a player like Gabby who can, if she gets an opportunity to post up like Kelsey Plum or post up Chelsea Gray, like, it's not even necessarily that she's scoring. It's just like she can force the defense to have to react because she's strong, she's quick, and she makes good decisions with the ball in her hands. Like, she's really good at finding ways to use some of her weaknesses against teams.
And Mark, you bring up those guards that the Aces have. One thing I want to ask you on the flip side for the Storm and their defense is Sue Bird. And obviously, I just talked about the differences in Washington and the Aces' offense, and no disrespect to Washington, but dealing with the Aces is a whole nother set of issues. So my question, plain and simple to you, is the Storm going to be able to be put in a situation where they can, quote unquote, hide Sue Bird defensively?
That's a good question. I think a lot of it is going to be, and part of the reason why they do so much stuff with trapping and hedging and throwing to the ball is so that they don't have to put her on ball defending. Like, Sue is going to get, she doesn't have the foot speed anymore to be a good on ball defender, but honestly, like, she's still a very good off the ball defender. She's really good at, stunting at the nail. She calls out a lot of things for them defensively, like, kind of like, I don't know how much NBA coverage you do, but very similar to, like, what D'Angelo Russell did for the Timberwolves this year. And I think she actually does it to a higher level even. But yeah, I think that'll be a really interesting chess match to watch. And I think that's part of, like you're talking about, when you have a team that, like, if this Aces team is really able to play aggressively on defense and force some turnovers, and more importantly, just push the pace. Like, I think that's really important to try and make it so a defense can't get set, because when a defense is able to get set, when they have time to call things out and react, it's a lot harder to pick them apart. And I think, like we've seen, especially like you mentioned with the Mystics, like, the Mystics play the slowest pace in basketball. So they really let Seattle get back, and that made it that much harder on them. So I think especially for the Aces, like, really need to see them ratchet up the pace. Obviously meaningfully, you can't just, run and gun for no reason. There has to be purpose behind it. But I think that's been a story for them all years. They're at their best when they're able to really blend pace and their defense together.
And two final questions. When we look at this series, what is going to be your X factor overall, whether it's for the Storm, whether it's for the Aces, the one thing you're going to look out for as this gets underway?
That's such a good question. I think for me, I think the X factor for the Aces for me would probably, like, saying just their defense sounds like not enough.
You
Like
sound
I
like
mean,
Becky
like I
Hammond.
think to me, well, yeah, I mean Becky Hammond in a sense, but I think it's more just like how are they going to play defense? Because I think we've seen like points like earlier this season, like their defense was phenomenal. They played really aggressively. They, they'd play Asia very close to the level of the screen, and they just were really good at finding ways to, even though they were small, they were really good at playing the gaps and just playing like that. That's the kind of stuff I want to see them get back to, particularly against the Storm, who are not great at forcing looks on the inside and trying to make them a team that really has to rely on their jump shooting. But I think that's where it goes into Jewell Loyd is the real X factor in this series for me. Like if Jewell Loyd is playing like she has the last 2 weeks, this makes that a much harder series for the Aces.
And to bring that up, she's kind of been the last two matchups against the Aces in the regular season. Obviously, we brought up the finale where she scored 38 points, but then that final game in Seattle, when she played 30 minutes. She had 1 point total. So, and you could just see on the offensive side like the difference that makes. And that the regular season finale was amazing basketball. That was 109-100. It was pushing the pace, and her and Chelsea Gray were going at it. It was amazing. It was heavenly. But before we get you out of here, a two-part question. Number one, you said you're a vote getter. We're in Las Vegas. We got this woman on the team. She's going to be on the cover of some Ruffles chips. We really enjoy her. Her name's A'ja Wilson. We're just curious, did you vote for her for MVP? And then two, with the Final Four set, I need predictions on both series.
Okay. Well, yeah, first and foremost, I'm happy to say I did vote A'ja Wilson MVP.
Smart man.
I actually be on the lookout for it too. I have a feature coming out on her on Sunday, the morning of the game. I just talked to her a couple days ago. She's fantastic. I love A'ja. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. As for actual predictions, I think right now, man, I think I would take the Aces in 5 currently. That could change, but I think that's where I would go right now. On the other side, I'm feeling probably Sky in 4, as much as I really would like to personally see. I would love to see Connecticut win, like just because, I mean, I'm biased because I just did a really big feature on Alyssa Thomas and was out in Connecticut for a week, but
WNBA.com, check that out.
Yeah, I mean, just like mainly, it really feels like this is the last time we're going to see that team together. Everything that's coming out from there, at the way Kurt Miller's talking, the way that Alyssa talked, like it kind of feels like this is the last chance we're going to see from this team to really make some noise. Everything has kind of gone against them. That said, I'm still not picking them to win this. That could change up, but again, I think I'd probably take the Sky in 4 because I just think it's going to be a really difficult matchup. But to be fair too, like what I'm most excited about, both of these matchups were some of the best matchups 1-to-1 that we saw the entire year. Like every single game between the Sun and Sky was single-digit points. The Sky won all 4, but it was very close. All of the games were very fun. Same thing with Storm and Aces. Other than I think the first game they played was right after Stewie got out of COVID protocols, if I remember correctly. So they were a little bit hampered, but I'm just really excited to watch these series play out.
No, 100%. What are we? We are a day away when you're hearing this, wherever you're getting this. And Mark, before we get you out of here, just a quick plug on where everyone can find you, social media, all your writing and all your features and everything. Make sure you get your plugs in.
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate you having me on. It was really, really great to connect, man. You can find me on Twitter at MG_Schindler. That's MG_SCHINDLER. I'm really active there. That's where I'm going to post most of my stuff. Find me at WNBA.com, Dime Up Rocks. I have a Patreon as well. So thanks for having me on, man.
No, of course. I appreciate the X's and O's and breaking it down, and hopefully our Aces make the final so we can have you back. Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
Welcome back to the WNBA playoff and Aces preview show here for Audacy Sports. It has been packed as we are trying to bring you the best perspective and insight from around the league. And that continues with someone I can officially call a friend because it isn't her first time joining us, but we welcome in women's basketball analyst for Just Women's Sports and Winsider. She's also a former player, a coach, a Hall of Famer, and someone who has returned from American soil after covering the game in Europe. Rachel Galligan joins us. Rachel, welcome back to America. How are you? Are you jet lagged?
I'm very jet lagged, but you know what? I'm really today I would say it's been about a couple days. Today's the first day I'm kind of somewhat feeling normal again. And I appreciate the welcome back. I'm really glad to be here and able to kind of shift my focus a little bit more to these WNBA semifinals.
Perfect. And before we dive into everything, last time we had you on, you did an amazing article and story that you did with Kelsey Plum, and that's why we had you on. And we really wanted to focus on everything that story was about because it was very important, just even outside of basketball. But a motto that we have around here is that we talk about sports and other things. And you being a former coach, I have a question for you. But first, it's time for story time because since the All-Star break, I've been fortunate enough to cover the Aces and go to these games. And the last game that the Chicago Sky had against Vegas here in Las Vegas, I was situated behind the Sky bench. And James Wade, to say the least, was not having a fun time in the first quarter and was very argumentative with the coaches. Or with the referees, I should say. And he probably did the pettiest thing I've seen in all of sports. I've never seen a coach do this. My dad was a coach for 20 years. It was unbelievable, but I thought it was brilliant. So like I said, he was pissed off at the refs, and there was a TV timeout. The basketball is going along the bench of the Sky, heading out of bounds. One of the assistant coaches picks up the ball and is getting ready to throw it to the ref to just help out and be a kind person. James goes, "Throw that ball on the ground. Don't pass it to him. What the hell's wrong with you?" And other expletives. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was amazing, and it was so petty, and I appreciated it. Now, you in your career, whether it's playing or as a coach, what's the pettiest thing you've done?
Oh, my gosh. I wasn't a big smack talker at all. I was one of those players that just kind of like to have my game do my speaking for me. But I guess you're putting me on the spot here. But I would say my senior year, it really wasn't even petty. It's just there was a player. She was wanting to get up in my grill early on in the game, and it was our conference tournament, so everything's really intense at this point. She blocked my shot to start the game, and I was like, okay, respect. I respect you. And she kind of got in my face and did what she did, and I was like, okay, noted, mental note. And I'm the type, like, you do something like that, I would go off. I couldn't help it. So I think I ended up having like 28 or 30 that game. We ended up beating them by about 15, advancing to the championship. And then the final, I think I hit a shot and then came down. She took a shot. I swatted out of bounds, and I just kind of walked right past her and kind of like nudged her in the shoulder. And I was like, "How you like that?" And then she kind of chest bumped me. We got into it. We had to be separated. It was, it was one of those things.
And then we point to the scoreboard and say, "Have a good off season." You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
I love it. And from there, we'll transition and we'll stay on coaching, as a matter of fact, because earlier today, you broke the news, saw it on Twitter. Becky Hammon, first year in the WNBA, wins Coach of the Year. One thing I've appreciated within this, the second half of the season since the Commissioner's Cup, they've won 7 in a row. Being there and getting to cover the team is that, number one, anytime there's a run that the other team's going on, or whether it's Kelsey, it's Asia, doesn't matter who on the team, when they blow an assignment or they mess something up, or even if it's just 2 quick baskets for the other team and now the leads shrink to 10 points for the Aces, she's calling a timeout and she's ending it. And obviously, in a bigger picture throughout the season, this team going from a team that didn't want to take threes to breaking the WNBA playoff and just record in general for most threes, and just the efficiency and the fast break and the transition and everything. What has been the biggest thing for you, for Becky this year, making this transition from the NBA to WNBA and leading the Aces to this success and into this Final Four of the playoffs?
I'll be completely honest. I was on the fence for who I was going to vote for Coach of the Year until really the final game of the season. I think there was an argument to be made about Tanisha Wright. I think there was an argument to be made about James Wade, obviously Becky Hammon. For me, I actually had someone else down before Becky. And I'm sitting there and I'm analyzing and obviously watching all these games throughout the course of this entire season, and everything you had talked about, following the Aces specifically very heavily myself as just a franchise that I've really enjoyed watching. And I think you have to step back, and a lot of people who were against Becky Hammon being voted for this award, well, she inherited a great team. She did, but just because you inherit a great team doesn't mean they end up top in the league standings and doing what they're doing. If you really look at what the Aces have done this season. And being able to take, a lot of really solid talent, not a lot of depth on the bench, but this high octane offense and I kind of keep saying, like, she's put this team out on the court playing in their most innate, pure way, in the way in which these players are designed to play. Asia Wilson, Kelsey Plum, Jackie Young, in a system that kind of was a little bit helter-skelter in the past. It was still really fun to watch, but that brand of basketball didn't really fit the genetic makeup of these individual players. And so I think what honestly impresses me the most, not only has she stepped into this franchise and this team and taken their chemistry to the next level. From everything you can tell, even as an outsider, you can tell how close this team is. You can tell how much fun this team has, how much they've embraced her right off the bat, but how much they've learned from her and how much she's learned from them and how much she has taken them individually, in their individual skill sets, their strengths, their weaknesses, and found a way to put them in areas where they can all be successful. Everybody on that team is having a breakout year, one way or another. You can argue it in some sort of statistical category. And then as a collective unit, they just look phenomenal. It's a beautiful brand of basketball. Yeah, are there concerns about depth? Are there concerns about other areas that might end up hindering this team's ability to win a championship? Yes, but that's not the point. I just think Becky Hammon has done a phenomenal job taking an already really good team and making it even better. And I just don't think that she's gotten enough respect from the naysayers of this award for what she's done. That's not easy. And it damn sure, pardon my language, isn't easy to do in a few months. So I just really respect just her ability, not just to manage this team, but to continue to take this team and elevate them to the next level.
And also, there has to be something to be said for, number one, the pressure of her signing the big contract, the record-breaking $1 million deal, and even some of the players commenting like, okay, wow, they're getting paid so much more than me, and also just the team
Right.
and the expectations that they had, because this has been a successful team. We're facing the Storm. They played them in the finals a couple years ago. And since before we get into this series and we're talking about awards and big picture stuff, just real quick, I wanted to get your thoughts on the first round, the flip of the 3-game series as opposed to the single elimination. I know James Wade made some comments about it, about he wasn't necessarily a fan. Where do you fall on this topic?
I think that there's pros and cons to both. Inevitably, I think I like it a little bit more. Obviously for the Chicago Sky, it hindered them because they had to go and win on the road. But if you take care of business at home, those first 2 games, you don't have to worry about that, So I think the single elimination game was brutal. I thought it was really a trap game. I thought that it left very little room for error throughout the consistency we see some of these teams, kind of play through the course of the season. You have one bad night, you're done. So I personally am a little bit more of a fan of the 3-game series. I think we get to kind of have a little bit more of a stretched out competitive series, in terms of just who is the actual better team in this scenario. I get that. I get the argument of, okay, well, Chicago had to go play on the road and to win the series, but that's what a series is about. So I'm a fan. I personally am a big fan.
Yeah, and as we get into this Aces and Storm series, I've asked it to everyone that's been on the show, just throwing it out here. What are your initial thoughts? We've had a week to kind of dive in and think about this series because it's finally happening this Sunday. But what are your initial thoughts on the series?
My God, could there be a more star-studded, just high-octane matchup? This is what it's all about. I literally get chills thinking about this matchup and the possibility of it going to 5. So many superstars between these two teams. Number 1 picks. I think it's 7. I think I read somewhere earlier 7 number 1 picks.
Yeah,
between these two
WNBA
teams.
and NBA record for most number 1 picks in one series.
And there's so many storylines, with Sue Bird competing, and I just think that it is. I can't wait to dive into it. I think that this is what it's about. The 2 of the top best teams. Either one of these teams could go win it all. And I think it's going to be really fun basketball. It's going to be a beautiful brand of basketball. You just have such superstars between Brianna Stewart, Asia Wilson, Kelsey Plum. We already talked about Sue Bird. This is just basketball heaven, in my opinion.
Yes, it is. We cannot wait. We had to wait a week for it. Can we play now, please?
Right.
One thing I do want to ask you for the Storm, and someone who even against the Aces, the final 2 matchups, that the Storm and Aces had in the regular season. You know, Jewel Lloyd, that final matchup in Seattle, she played 30 minutes, had 1 point. Regular season finale, record career high 38 points. So my question to you is, does Jewel Lloyd need to be the best overall guard on the floor for either team for Seattle to win?
I don't know that she needs to be the best overall guard on the floor, but she has to be there for Seattle. You know, I think she's 100% the X factor for the Storm to be able to have success. I think the one game Seattle won in the regular season, she went off in the fourth quarter and kind of had that Mamba mentality that we've seen Jewel Lloyd have, and she's been really inconsistent this season. This has not been one of Lloyd's superstar seasons in terms of just offensive production, and Seattle needs her to do that, especially when you're playing the Aces, because from an offensive perspective, I mean, again, what was the last time they matched up? It was like 111 to 110. I mean, just unbelievably like ridiculous scoring outputs from both teams, and I just don't see how Seattle is going to be able to keep up with the pace of Vegas's ability consistently to score the basketball if she's not good throughout the course of this series.
And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on and give me this coach perspective is for this next question, and it deals with the Aces and defensively. One clip that I keep going and seeing on social media that kind of blows my mind with Seattle offensively. They had a offensive possession where basically Sue Bird is off ball. Tina Charles sets a screen at the 3-point line. Immediately, as soon as she sets the screen, Tina Charles goes straight to the basket. Sue Bird fakes like she's going to actually go to the screen, but then she comes back to where she started. Washington is confused. Sue Bird gets an easy 3. So for you, what are kind of some of the things that defensively the Aces need to look out for, and kind of do they need to keep Kelsey Plum out of being the main ball defender, and some of those really X's and O's aspects for the Aces and what they need to do defensively against the Storm?
You know, I really think that the 3-point line is such a huge factor for both teams in this matchup. Both teams rely on their ability to shoot the 3 ball, and around 35-36% of both of these teams' offenses come from the 3-point line. And I am a firm believer. I actually was for a long time, you know, about Kelsey Plum in the MVP. The ball is in her hands more than anyone else on the floor. She's playing more minutes, and there's so much on her shoulders. I do think that when it comes to, you know, the ability to shoot the ball the way the Aces have shot it this year, it starts and ends with Kelsey Plum. So for Seattle, they've got to find ways to just keep her uncomfortable. You know, they've got to get up in her space. They've got to contest shots. If she's in a rhythm from the perimeter, it's going to be a long series. I don't even know if it'll go to 5. You know, if Plum is able to do what she does so well. Now, you're not going to be able to stop her. You're just going to have to hope to be able to contain her and make her uncomfortable, in my opinion. You know, if you catch Plum on a really bad offensive night, from what she's shown this year, that's just a lucky draw, in my opinion. You know, she's going to do what she does, and she's so smart. She's going to exploit every little thing that you give her. So, and then on the flip side, you know, Seattle relies heavily on the 3 ball as well. I mean, that's a huge stat. Whoever can defend the 3-point line better and limit teams to one and done has a huge advantage. Whoever shoots the ball better from the perimeter, I know that sounds really elementary, I think has a huge advantage. It starts and ends with a 3 ball with these two teams, out of how much they rely on that from their offensive production standpoint. And I think in general, you know, you have such superstars in Brandon Stewart, Angel Wilson. You know, obviously the offense running through those 2 MVP caliber players is everything. And so it's kind of like a beautiful chess match at this point, as to kind of what are teams going to take away, who's got the hot hand each given night. But really, it comes down to 3 ball, in my opinion, transition defense. And you know, that's a huge one.
And you brought up the X factor for Seattle, and being Jewel Lloyd. I'm wondering, on the flip side for the Aces, one thing that I kind of have some concern about is, and a lot of people have brought up the depth, and a lot of people have brought up the fatigue, but not only that, going up against Seattle and the bigs that they have, obviously you got Brianna Stewart, you got Tina Charles, is not only will they get tired and they're more physical for Asia Wilson, but she may get into foul trouble too. So is that one of the X factors and things you're looking at in terms of the Aces?
I think so, yeah, definitely. And I think you've got a question mark in Derek Hamby. Is she going to be able to go? She's not been able. I think she's been out since August 9th.
Yeah, and just to let you know, sorry to cut you off. So earlier today here in Las Vegas radio, Natalie Williams, the Aces, GM went on the radio and said that she is out for this series. Despite, to your point, they said 2 to 4 weeks. It's been 15 days since the injuries happened, but they're keeping her out of the series. So,
and that's a huge blow. I mean, that's a huge blow. Hamby has not had her most dominant season, her most productive season in terms of, just numbers. But what she brings to this team in terms of depth and all the things that we're talking about of, heaven forbid, Asia Wilson gets in foul trouble, who are you going to rely on? You essentially are playing, your 5 starters have to be perfect for 3 games to win this thing. And that leaves a very small margin for error.
No, 100%. Do you, how do I ask this question? So I've noticed these past couple of games, the luxury of so much talent that the Aces have had. For instance, in Game 2 versus the Mercury, Kelsey Plum first quarter wasn't that great. But this team has an ability to pick your poison, whether it's Jackie Young, Chelsea Gray, Asia Wilson, where one of them is going to go off in the quarter and score 10 or 15 points in that quarter alone. And then not only does that maintain the scoring output that the Aces need, but then the other player that is struggling hasn't lost confidence because everyone's moving up and down the court. We're having fun. They look like the Suns out there with Steve Nash. So do you worry about, is that magic going to run out? Or is it a situation where, like, look, we're at the Final Four. We got 2 more rounds left to a championship. It's worked all the way up to here. I don't see why that would stop.
I don't see why that would stop. It's actually amazing to watch what this team has done with the amount of numbers that we're talking about here. Such superstardom, and I think one of the best things about them is they have short-term memory. And I mean that in a good way. From one shot might be a bad shot, one quarter might be a bad quarter, one game might be a bad game, but they're just resilient and they bounce right back and they just keep going. I mean, they just keep going, and when it's going good, it's obviously very natural and very easy. But this is a team that will fight and claw and will come back, and they don't let things hold them down for very long, if at all. And I think that's a credit to the Chelsea Grays, the Kelsey Plums, the Jackie Youngs. And I think this is what they do. And it's actually phenomenal and amazing to see, because they could go win this whole thing with these amount of, just a few amount of players that are producing at the level that they're doing. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I will say I'm really concerned about the De'Erica Hamby thing. That's a huge blow.
Yeah, 100%. And I know that Becky Hammond spoke to the media. She wasn't supposed to, but then when the announcement came out, so I'm trying to make sure that there's a second verification. But as we know, she's going to be out for the series. And I think Gabby Williams did not practice today. But they are going to say something about what her status is. So, of course, those are 2 big things to look at for either team going into the series. You're tuned in, Audacy Sports, the 2020 WNBA playoff preview here for the Aces as we gear up for this amazing series with Seattle and the Las Vegas Aces. Joining us now, Rachel Galligan. And be sure to follow her, too, on Twitter, at Rachel Gal. Rach Gal, RACHGALL. 2 more questions before we get you out of here. And this is something that I'm waiting to ask Chelsea Gray. I haven't been able to, or I'm kind of scared, but I have to ask you. Do you think she's human?
No, she's not.
Because it's insane. Every game for like the past 3 months, there's something that doesn't make sense. How is she doing that? It's unbelievable.
Well, and I think she's elevated her play to that next gear these last couple weeks, personally. And that's a huge sign for Vegas, because she's already, everyone point guard and all the things that she's done, that clutch gene that she has innately in her body. But, watching her throughout the course of this season and elevating that play when she can, when she needed to, others don't, she doesn't have to all the time. The role that she fills on this team, I just personally feel like she's taken it to another level the last couple weeks, and that's scary. But it's fun for us, so no, she's not human.
Yeah, I can't wait to ask her. She's gonna look at me crazy, but I gotta be honest, man. I don't see that in the court ever. Before we get you out of here, Rachel, it is the moment of truth. We are down to the Final Four. No, I'm not gonna ask you who you voted for MVP. Okay, I'm not gonna do that. I want to know with these Final Four teams. I want the predictions on both sides of the bracket on who you have making it to the WNBA Finals.
Man, you have a rematch of last year's semis with the Chicago Sky and Connecticut Sun. I could make an argument for either one. Part of me, man, Connecticut, I want it to be their year because they haven't quite reached that hump, but I just don't. I'm not convinced that the Chicago Sky are going to let that happen with their experience, their depth. They are the most complete team in terms of everything they bring to the table, in my opinion. So I've got Chicago Sky going to the finals. Now, in terms of this one, I mean,
here we go.
I think it'll go to 5. I think that Aces starting at home is a huge advantage. That's a huge advantage. This team is phenomenal at home, but they're even better. Not even better, but they are the better team on the road. They've been consistently showing that throughout the course of the season. So I think it's going to go to 5, and I've got Las Vegas Aces. The Vases, I like that one. So I've got Aces in the Sky in the final would be my prediction as of today.
Okay, so in your book, the rivalry will continue to grow between Chicago and Las Vegas, and maybe some more James Wade antics against the refs. So I'm down for this 100%. Rachel, as always, thank you for joining us. Congratulations, officially a friend of the station, a friend of the show, a friend of mine. And to get her coverage, be sure to look her out, like I said earlier, on Twitter at RachGall. RACHGALL, a part of Winsider, basketball analyst for Just Women's Sports. One of the best, giving you the insight when it comes to women's basketball. We look forward to this Final Four, and we look forward to hopefully having the Aces in the finals so that we could have you on for the WNBA Finals preview show as well.
I appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much. A pleasure as always.
Boom. And just like that, we are an hour closer to tip off. The Final Four is set. We've waited a week, and Sunday it all goes down for the WNBA playoff semifinals, a rematch of last year's semifinals between the defending champions, the Chicago Sky, versus the Connecticut Sun, the 2020 champions, the Seattle Storm, versus the Las Vegas Aces in a 2020 WNBA Finals rematch. What more can you want? The basketball is going to be absolutely beautiful, and we can't wait for it. So we hope we kept you informed, gave you more insight. Thanks to all of our illustrious guests, Rachel Galligan from Just Women's Sports and Winsider, Matt Schneider from WNBA.com, The Athletic and Dime Up Rocks, and Alexa Philippou from ESPN, all bringing it strong, all bringing the knowledge and what we need as we get ready for these games. I go by the name of Adrian Hernandez. It has been my pleasure, been my honor to bring some coverage and do my best in bringing some WNBA coverage to everyone. So be sure to hit us up on Twitter at @TheBetLasVegas, at Audacy Sports, and at Adrian Radio 93. Have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy these games and be safe. Peace.